Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everybody, this is Dr. John back with the latest episode of the Evolved Caveman podcast, and it is my honor to have with me today my fiancée.
Hi, it's Jory Rose with the Journey Forward with Jory Rose podcast. John and I are here to continue to share our journey of both the ongoing healing of our relationship and both the inner work and relational work that we have done specifically over the shitty hard parts of 2023, which we are so grateful to have behind us. But yet there was so much that went on. And we've shared a couple of episodes already, kind of jumping around in the timeline of our breakup and what we did to get back together. And obviously more recently about you going through the grief with the loss of your son. But we want to kind of rewind a little bit and share more of what happened in the middle, because we have some really crazy experiences that were really spiritual, powerful, connecting, and not easy to explain in a logical, rational mind.
Yeah, and you're so good at providing context, so thank you for that. And so let's go back to early 2023,
Okay.
where we were just looking at getting back together.
Yes.
And you were
After
going
a
on
short but painful breakup. We weren't even
a
broken
couple
up for
months.
6 weeks, barely 2 months.
Yeah. And you were heading out on a cruise with a friend. Was it Esther Hicks?
Yeah, Abraham
cruise.
Hicks. Yeah.
Abraham Hicks thing. Well,
Law of attraction. Yeah.
yeah. And I have had eye troubles, to put it mildly, over the past, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And I've had 3 surgeries on my right eye, 2 where they tried to fix a 90% detached retina, and then a corneal surgery where they replaced the lens. So that was my bad eye. And for a couple of years afterwards, like I couldn't read, I couldn't do computer work. Like it was significant. When they'd asked me to read a letter on the eye chart, I just saw a wavy white rectangle on the wall. There wasn't even a letter. And it was pretty scary. And over time, I worked on that, and it slowly got better, which was encouraging. And right about the time you left for this cruise, I started having floaters in my left eye, my good eye. And I thought, oh, this isn't good. And immediately called the ophthalmologist. They got me in, or the optometrist. And he took a look in my eye and he said, it looks like you got a retinal tear. Let me make a call. And this was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Pleasanton.
And it was a rainy day.
Stormy. It was stormy. And they had dilated my eyes too, which is significant. And so he calls the retinal specialist and he says, the retinal specialist will see you right now. Go to Walnut Creek. And I was like, oh shit.
In the middle of rush hour.
That's not a good sign when you got one good eye and they're rushing you to the retinal specialist. And so my eyes are dilated. I can't see very well to begin with. It's pouring rain in rush hour, and I'm trying to get to Walnut Creek as quickly as I can.
So for those who don't know, that's 30 minutes on a good day without traffic.
Yeah. And I made it there. I remember they called me and I was almost there, and they're like, where are you? I'm like, well, I'm just a couple blocks away, because it was 5 o'clock and the office was closing. And I went in and the retinal specialist saw me, and I'm really grateful because he stayed an hour and a half with just me. Like it was just me and him in the office. But he took a look in my eye and he goes, yeah, I don't see just one tear. And he started counting. I see 2, 4, 7. Yeah, there's about 10 tears in there. I'm like, oh man. And he's like, we're going to have to try and zap him with the laser and see if we can, and I've done this before. I guess I've had 4 surgeries on the right eye, if you count that as surgery. But it's it's an uncomfortable procedure where they're shooting a laser into the back of your eye to form scar tissue around the edges of the tear so that it doesn't tear anymore. And every burst lights up your eye like a star just exploded. And you can feel it in the back of your eye. It's a really odd sensation. And so he hits me about 3 times, and I'm kind of taking it, and he realizes we got a lot of this to do. And he says, I'll be right back. I need to get some anesthesia. And I was like, oh boy, I hope that's a spray on or a pill or something they're going to inject in my arm. And it wasn't any of those. And he comes back with a needle of lidocaine that he's going to inject in my eyeball. And I got 6 shots in the eye, one of which he's like, look left. And I'm looking directly at the shot coming in my eye.
What's going through your mind? How did you mentally get through that? I mean, thank God for mindfulness practice for you to breathe and
I think it's breathe,
focus.
stay present, but I think at a certain point you also go into shock.
Yeah.
This is what I got to do, I guess. Like, I didn't even know this sort of barbarism was possible. I didn't realize modern medicine did this kind of stuff.
And you were there alone.
Yeah. And I was there for an hour and a half, then, getting lasered in the eye. And this, like, I got hit so many times with the laser. He's wearing it on his head. It's a unit attached to his forehead. And it got so hot, he had to put Kleenex between his forehead and the unit. And he's sweating. And I'm like, wow, this is wild.
That's intense.
So then he finishes and he's like, I want to see you again in 2 days or something. And I'm like, okay, shit, I got to get home now. I got one bad eye and I'm blind now in the other eye temporarily. And I got to get home at dark in a raging storm. So I went and got some dinner just to give my eye a little bit of time to recover, and then slowly crept home from Walnut Creek. And so that was kind of the start of another journey. Because the question in my mind when I'm going through something traumatic is, what am I supposed to learn from this? Like, what's the symbolism? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? Like, yes, I understand that there's a physical aspect to this. Absolutely. And I think there's something more to it than just that.
Can I pause with that question just really quick? Because I think that's something you and I share deeply in common outside of what we have brought to each other in our relationship, is looking for deeper meaning. And I'm curious, for you listening, how often that question comes to you of, what am I here to learn? Why is this happening? Yes, there's this physical aspect. Yes, this is, a legitimate medical issue. And I personally am under the belief there's often spiritual meaning into almost everything. And yes, we could take it too far, but I always find that question to bring a little bit of peace, because it can say, okay, there's purpose to this. I don't know what it is yet. It might take a long time to find it, but for me personally, it brings a little bit of peace to the storm.
And, we know from research that it's one of the ways to go from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. The people that can do that ask themselves, what am I supposed to learn from this? And I also think on a cosmic scale that the universe, however you want to put it, life presents us with lessons, and we're presented with those lessons over and over and over again until we get it. And so the easiest way to move through life is to understand the lesson, adapt, and move on. The hardest way to go through life is to continually be hit over the head with the same damn lesson, which I see some people do, and it just looks really painful.
And I think those are ones that get stuck in that victim role mentality, right? They can't get out of becoming the hero to heal their own suffering.
It's empowering, right? I'm the hero of my own story. I'm going to deal with this shit. And in the end, I'm going to see myself as more resilient, as more
Yeah.
heroic, as more courageous.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the other kind of tangent I wanted to take is I want to
So
talk
hold
about
on, wait,
this.
wait, but,
Yeah.
but did you, in the moment, did you have an answer to that question yet of what am I supposed to
No,
learn from this?
no, in the moment, I just felt sorry for myself. I mean, I was
Yeah.
down. It was rough.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't believe that just happened.
Yeah.
I felt violated at some level.
Understandable.
And it's
Well, and
also,
just
you
to
know, the
give,
best thing for me at some level.
right. Well, and we were just on the cusp of getting back together. I had just reconnected with you the day before, kind of saying, committing to, I want to be with you, I want to be back together. And now here I am on the other side of the country, completely helpless as you're suffering. Like my heart was just torn in half of I should be there. Why
Yeah.
aren't I there? Like he should not be going through this alone. It was horrible to
Yeah.
witness that level of suffering for you and for me not to be there. So it
I'm sure.
was horrible.
So before we get to the woo woo spiritual part of this episode, I have to do a brief disclaimer um, because my training in the PhD program at UC Berkeley was all science, hard science, empirical science, data backed research. And that was what I was trained in. And that's what I believed was the lens through which to see the world when I came out of there at 29, 30. And I think science is a brilliant framework. I love science. And at this point in my life, I've also struggled with the concept and realize, and I'm comfortable now with the idea that science is merely one lens through which to see the world. And science sometimes lags behind some truths that have been out there for thousands of years. Science moves
Mhm.
slowly, and science can't explain everything. And science is limiting for us as humans at some level on, I would say, an emotional or spiritual level.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to me because I've done a lot of reading about scientists over the past 100 years and whether or not they felt comfortable espousing spiritual beliefs. And it was not done
Mhm.
until maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. And then it slowly began where scientists felt comfortable saying, I am both a scientist and I believe in spirituality. Because before you would just be ostracized for it, it could kill a career.
Yeah.
And yet, I think, you know, we're big enough to contain multitudes, we're big enough to contain paradoxes, we're big enough to contain contradictions. And so I really worked to come to peace with this idea that part of me is a scientist, part of me is research and data driven. And then there's part of me that, while I know there can be no empirical proof of God or a higher power, the emotional side of me finds it greatly comforting and reassuring and reduces my anxiety to believe that there is a kind, forgiving, loving God with a sense of humor. That's
Mhm.
my God. Um, and so that's the caveat to the rest of this story because this story gets a little out there.
It gets pretty woo woo, and I really appreciate that availability for you to embrace more of the spirituality because I think I come from a very spiritual approach and not religious, but just belief in the universe. Things happen for a reason. What's the lesson here? What's the message? Sometimes I over attach to the message and give it a little bit too much credit, as I've done in the past. And I think when we first met, you were a little bit more data driven, roll the research says. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's helpful. I agree. And so it's been really actually beautiful to witness this cracking open of more acceptance into the things that can't be explained. Because this past year came with a lot of shit that is not super easy to explain from a cognitive rational viewpoint or perspective.
Yeah. Okay. So that said, so I'm recovering from this eye issue. And I think I put it out on Facebook and got a lot of support and love. And I appreciate that. So thank you to everyone that did that and did the same stuff with when Brett passed. I
Mhm.
really, it means a lot to me. Um, and I've got a friend who we've traded interviews, podcast interviews, Nishant Garg, great young man. And he called me up and we were talking and he said, "Hey, I want to give you a gift. I want to set you up with my spiritual healer and I'll pay for the session." And I was like, and I'm practicing, taking in love. I'm practicing asking for and receiving help, which is, hard for most men, maybe everybody. And I think it's a really good practice to engage in. And so I said, "Wow, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's really kind. I would love to do that." So I went into it and so her name is Pasha and she's in North Carolina and we set up a Zoom call. And I went into it. It's funny to think a spiritual healer over Zoom, like how does that work? Um,
Can
went
I
into
give
it with an open,
one little piece of information
please,
that I think is
please.
powerful? You had already decided years ago some of the meaning of your first eye problem. Can you share what you had taken to believe of why that happened? Your Odin
Mm,
reference?
oh wow, yeah.
Because
Thank you.
that comes into play with the conversation with Pasha. So just for
Yeah,
some bigger context of the intricacies in which this spiritual healer validated your belief
yeah,
system you already had.
yeah. So in an effort to make sense of losing the use of my right eye for many years, um, I really struggled. I really worked or looked into mythology and Jungian archetypes and symbolism. And one of the meanings which I found profound and helpful was the archetype of Odin, the Allfather, the god of gods in Norse mythology, Thor's father. Any Marvel superhero is pretty familiar with him, or any Marvel fan. And what I realized is that Odin went to the Tree of Life. I think it's pronounced Yggdrasil. I'm not 100% sure on that. The Tree of Life is also an acacia tree, which is interesting because acacia means immortal. Um, and he sacrificed his right eye in exchange for wisdom. He sacrificed vision for vision, vision for wisdom, vision for insight. And
I kind of take
that's,
that to feel like external vision for exchange of internal wisdom to
yeah.
see within others. Yeah.
And that felt like a trade I could make. It was a bargain I was willing to accept.
Yeah. So
So
now,
yeah. So now, yeah, wow, this is a little more emotional than I thought. So I get on this Zoom call with Pasha, and I didn't tell her much about me, my name, and that I had an eye injury. And she knew who sent me. She spoke for 95% of the hour that we were on this call, and everything she said was spot on. And a couple of the things she said, I mean, we were talking about the eye, and she said, "Yeah, I see like claw marks in the back of your eye. Like, was someone clawing at you metaphorically to get you to see something or to see differently?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I got to guess who that is." Um,
sorry for that.
yeah, and I think that also it was, part of the symbolism. The question I had to ask myself is, what do I need to see differently? What do I
Yeah.
need to look at differently? What am I not seeing? What do I need to wake up to? And that was helpful too, just to get more cognitive flexibility, right? Just to be more curious, to be more open-minded about what do I need to change? How do I need to perceive things differently? And so I was curious about this, about, I went in with an open mind with Pasha. I After I met with her, I was like, damn, like it feels like there's something here. Like this isn't bullshit. And so I went to you and I told her, kind of what happened. And I said, I think you wanted to see her. And I was like, would you see her and just see if we get the same thing? Because you get a videotape or the recording of the Zoom
Audio
call.
recording.
Yeah.
Well, and there was more. She confirmed your belief around Odin,
Mm-hmm.
and she also gave you this spiritual purpose
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Go ahead.
to those listening that you're probably thinking this is like such fucking bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Yeah,
as we said, it gets pretty far out there. So
it's
she
pretty
said something
woo.
about I'm on the path of the shaman and I'm a guardian of the trees. And it cracked me up. She's like, yeah, you need to go learn how to talk to the trees. And I was like, that's going to take me years. Like I can talk to the trees. I really don't know how to hear the trees very well. And I was just
What am I
laughing. I was
supposed
like,
to say?
how the fuck do I talk to trees? And
But
so,
yet
yeah, so,
this relationship to Odin and wisdom and the trees, like it was confirmation of something you had already intuitively sensed.
mhm,
So to get this person who knew nothing about you to confirm this belief system of this higher power purpose of what you had gone through, it was pretty powerful. And when you played the recording for me, because there was other stuff in there too, and personality, and you would, I think at one point, a question about our breakup or getting back together, and what could she see or help us with that, and some personality things. So you had me listen to it,
mhm,
and I agree. I mean, it was pretty darn spot on. And then I got really intrigued, partly because I want to, like, well, what can she teach me? What can she tell me? But like you said, it was, is she a one trick pony? Is she going to give the
mhm,
same, kind of script or spiel to anybody? So I soon after contacted her, and my session was completely different. And the first thing that she had me do was repeat my name 3 times, which for me was a little bit confusing from the get go because I've had 3 different legal names. So I'm like, which one do I do? And by calling,
kind of gets
she
to
would
that who
then,
am I question, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Like, am I who I was when I was born? My married name, the legal name that I've embraced as who I am since my 40s. But what she's doing by that is calling in the spiritual team. And she's bringing in the well ancestors as guides to help give the information that she can receive to then impart, right, to me. And within minutes of me saying my name, one of the very first things she says to me is, Jory, you've been carrying a burden since you were 3. And I was like, yes, I have. And my session was completely different than yours. I went on to have a couple of more sessions. One of my sessions with her was helping me reprogram my belief systems starting from 1 years old. And
Mhm.
this is all over Zoom. And she had me stand up, and she started by asking me questions that I knew the answers to, and used my body as a pendulum. And she would ask me a question, is your name Jory? And my body on its own would lean forward. If it was forward, it was yes. If it leaned back, it was no. And she said statements in which I had to repeat, I am safe and secure at age 1. And my body would lean back. Okay, that was a no. And we would went through every age and reprogram. I mean, like, this is really woo-woo shit. She's in North Carolina, which, by the way, she moved to North Carolina from Southern California because she said one day she got a download from Spirit that she's supposed to move 30 miles outside Asheville, North Carolina. And she'd never been there. And during COVID, she says to her husband and teenage daughter or teenage kids, yeah, so Spirit told me we're supposed to move. And they're like, okay. And they literally lived, I think she told me 29.6 miles outside of Asheville.
Mhm.
So someone whose family is going to trust her intuition, I'm going to listen to that.
Yeah.
And part of, I think, what we haven't said yet is the open-mindedness to believe in spirituality is going to give you a greater depth of your experience with spirituality.
Well, and I think the other part that enters into this from the science side is a big piece of the research they've been doing around psychedelics, in particular psilocybin mushrooms, is they've been using the mystical experience questionnaire to test people pre and post after they go on a journey. And what they find is individuals get better overall results mentally, emotionally, the higher they score on this questionnaire. And the questionnaire is about things like, did you communicate with a higher power? Do you believe in a higher power? Did you feel connected with nature? Did you feel connected with yourself? Did you leave your body? Were you visited by a guide? It's all these spiritual concepts. And so I think there's something really beneficial to choosing beliefs that serve you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this really opened up this question of you and I of going deeper into the spiritual component for healing, not just your eye, but now that we were back together,
Us.
going deeper to heal us.
Yeah. So you want me to proceed with the next part of the story?
Yes.
So one fine afternoon, we were at Jory's and we had taken mushrooms. And
this was the day we were
backyard.
actually guiding another couple through a journey as well.
And we were in the hot tub. And I checked in with Jory to make sure she was good and said, I'll be right back. I need to go talk to the trees. Now, keep in mind that I think mushrooms do help in communication with trees. Full disclaimer. So I go over to talk to, she's got 3 giant redwoods in a kind of triangle pattern in her backyard, and a hammock is strung up between 2 of them. And the hammock had previously been chewed through by squirrels. And the first one was wrecked by squirrels, and we had to throw it out. And was this the second one? I always get that part of the story.
The second one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the second one, which we got in Costa Rica on one of our trips.
No, that's our new one. The second one I ordered off Amazon. The squirrels ate the second one.
Okay, so there was 2 that they went through. Okay, so it was a pattern. And so I went up to the trees and I put my hand on one of the trees and just started expressing gratitude toward them because I think it's cool that they, take CO2 and make oxygen with it so we can live. And immediately I looked at the rope that was suspending the hammock, and it looked like a hangman's noose to me. And I said to the trees, oh my God, I am so sorry. We didn't ask your permission to hang this from you. And I immediately took the hammock down and threw it in the corner.
I'm
You're like, what the fuck is he doing?
And he was like furious, like he couldn't get it off the trees fast enough. And this was about 2 months after Pasha had told you to talk to trees.
Mm-hmm.
And part of, if I may, before we go back to that one piece of it, part of it was you trying to understand, well, what am I supposed to hear from them?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a whole day spending in the redwood forest where we intentionally, Pasha said, go to the forest. And we're like, okay, Pasha said we should go to the forest. We went into the forest and sat amongst the trees. And so many of the trees we passed, you just would stop, put your hand up, close your eyes. And what I think you found from that day in the forest of, wait, it's actually not so hard to listen to trees. I thought it would take me years, and it just took the intention and the space. And I remember
weeks.
it didn't take very long. And I remember one of the things you had said from that day in the forest, that the trees were trying to teach you was patience.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I took that as patience for helping us heal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Patience for your own healing around your eye, right? It was a very powerful message. So this practice of connecting with the trees, well, simultaneously was around the time you got the book, The Secret Life of Trees.
The Hidden Life of Trees, yeah. And so I was reading that book, which is pretty mind blowing. I was like, I can't believe I'm reading a book about trees. And it was pretty spectacular. I mean, just the fact that trees can communicate above ground or below ground. They can communicate with one another via pheromones. Um, they can communicate below ground via mushroom networks, fungi networks. They
Which
can,
helps speak to the interconnectivity of all things from the
right,
psilocybin.
right. And they can shunt resources, water, for example, to young trees or sick or old trees. Um, they're social creatures. They can ward off predators by changing the taste of their leaves or injecting poison into their leaves. And the other thing that was interesting about it, because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, and so I'm always amazed at how Tolkien got the Ents so right, the tree shepherds. You know, they move slow, they talk slow, and research shows that information moves really slowly through them. An electrical impulse moves slowly, water moves slowly. So they can respond. They can, I don't even, I mean, I guess to some extent you could say they're conscious or they feel, but it's interesting to think of life on their time perspective, on their temporal
Mm-hmm.
perspective, that, many of these trees have been here hundreds of years, if not over 1,000 years. And what have they seen? And what
Mm.
have they withstood? And, the messages I would get from them were things like patience, strength, resiliency, temperance, moderation. Um, so anyways, to go circle back to the redwoods.
To go
So
back, yeah.
one of the
So
things I told the
you
redwoods
pulled
after
the
I furiously got the hammock off of them, I said, listen, next time we put up a hammock, we'll be sure to ask your permission. We won't put anything up until we ask your permission.
and it was
And
about a month later, we were in Costa Rica and
we got a
I bought a
third
new
one,
hammock. Yeah.
and we
And
went
we
and
made
asked
a little
permission.
ritual. Yeah.
Yeah, put it up, and no squirrels have ever gone after it.
Not yet. I don't think they will. I truly believe the squirrels were in defense of the trees.
I
And
think so too.
yeah,
So, you can interpret that any way you want. And that's pretty, like, okay, well, yeah, whatever. Like maybe John's insane. Maybe he's way out there. I don't know. But
he's doing
then,
too much mushrooms.
yeah, then the next thing happened, and this kind of solidified it for me.
And this was now about a month later, just to give context. So none of these happened all that far apart in time. It was now the
Yeah.
middle of summer.
This was insane. This was unlike anything I'd experienced ever. And I remember I had slept over your house and I got up early with the dogs. And so I brought them out back and I was out back drinking a cup of coffee and trying to keep the dogs quiet. And you came out
Mhm.
and pretty quickly you were like, what's that in the pool? And I was like, I don't know.
I
And we went
saw
over.
water splashing from the edge of the pool. And as we slowly walk over, on that first step was a baby owl stuck in the water, furiously flapping, trying to get out, but was stuck.
Yeah.
Owls are not water. Their
Repellent.
wings can't hand. Yeah, and so it was the wings were drowned down, and this little baby owl was trying to get out.
Yeah.
And
He
there's a
was
tree,
waterlogged, terrified, exhausted.
and it appears as though what we can make sense of is it was in the tree above that part of the pool, and it just fell out of the tree.
I like to think the tree dropped it in the pool.
Okay, good idea.
That
Yeah.
might be a bit of a stretch, but
So
So I said to
you told
Jory,
me
go
to,
get
yeah.
go get a dish towel. And she ran and got it. And I scooped them up out of the pool because their claws are incredibly sharp. Um, and this was a fledgling great horned owl. And we put it on the concrete and he kind of hopped over to the fence and then just stood there shivering and couldn't fly. And I said, go get a couple dry towels. And so with a dry towel, I scooped him up. I don't know how else to put it, but I swaddled him in two towels in an effort to dry him off.
To give context, this owl pretty much fit into the size of the palm of your hands. It was
Yeah.
maybe 4 or 5 inches tall, maybe 3 inches wide. At first, its eyes were closed, completely waterlogged, and our instinct was to take it to the wildlife museum so it could be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
But they weren't opened yet. This was like 8 in the morning on a Saturday. And we sat there just on the lounge chair that morning, cradling and drying off the owl.
Hmm. And it was interesting because it seemed to me that he slowly or she slowly began to trust us. Like at
Mm-hmm.
first, she was just terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, it seemed like there was some realization that, oh, these things are trying to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And she relaxed
And
into it.
and she started to open her eyes. And, at this point, we were able just to kind of pet her feathers and
Yeah.
create actual touch and not just through the towels. And this is, kind of hilarious because then there was some construction happening in the house behind me. And we're like, oh, it's getting loud. She might be scared. So
It
we
was
actually
really
had the
loud.
thought, we had the thought to bring her inside the house. And now we're sitting on my couch holding the baby owl. And at one point, she flies out of my hands. And I actually looked up the spiritual meaning of an owl flying in your house, and that had really good luck. So I was comforted by the whole thing. So we then took her to a different part of the yard. And by this point, it had been almost 2 hours. She was beginning to dry off. And now she was just freely sitting on you. It
Yeah,
wasn't
on
like,
my hand with the towel between us.
yeah.
And so
And
at one point she started to try and fly and couldn't fly yet, but flew down to the bottom of the fence and was sitting on the bottom of the fence. And so I just asked her, hey, can I pet you? And I don't know what she heard, but I reached my finger down and pet the back of her neck, and she just allowed me to do that.
yeah, this was powerful. This felt like a spiritual experience. And we knew
Yeah.
that in the moment. This wasn't just like, oh, we're rescuing a random animal. This felt like the continuation of connection with the trees, the interconnectivity of all things, back
Mm-hmm.
to you being the guardian of the trees, of giving up your eyesight for wisdom. I mean, this was a continued theme that we were now being given this gift. It was like we felt chosen by her. And she hopped along down the fence line and still didn't seem to move. So she was dried off, but still unable to really take flight.
Mm-hmm.
So then I remember you pulled a chair over, just sat and just watched her for probably another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And at this point, we kind of gave her a name. Now, we're connecting with the owl,
Mm-hmm.
and we named her Athena, goddess of wisdom.
Yeah.
And so then you realize you needed to help her to get back up into the tree, which where she started or where we think she started from.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again,
And
I asked her permission, can I pick you up and put you in the tree? And here's where it got really, I mean, the whole thing was profound, but this is where it got incredible and kind of hard to believe to me is I went down to scoop her up with the dish towel, and she didn't bat a wing. She did not even take a step away from me. She just
mm-mm,
allowed me to pick her up. That's a
mm-hmm,
wild owl that
mm-hmm,
we got to spend, 2.5 hours with, who I
mm-hmm,
believe learned to trust us. And
mm-hmm.
so I picked her up and put her on a low branch in the tree. And then 20 minutes later, she flew away.
Yeah.
And
And then you
going
had
to
a
the
session
spiritual
with Pot.
symbolism, going to the spiritual
Mm-hmm,
symbolism, let's of what we remember of owls: wisdom, protection from dark energy. They can see at night, so they walk between worlds.
also, their ability to rotate so they can see all around
300,
them.
yeah, 270 degrees, 270.
Mm-hmm.
So great vision, great insight. And yeah, so then I had a session with Pasha, I don't know, a week later maybe. And I told her about this, and she was psyched. She was like, oh my God. She's like, feather magic is so powerful. She's like, now all the owls know what you've done, and they're all looking out for you in the area. Now, I don't know what the truth is. I don't know what the reality is. I do know I like to pick the interpretation that serves me best. And I like that interpretation
Hmm.
that there's owls around us. Because every time I hear owls now, I'm comforted.
Yeah. Well, and I have a perimeter of trees surrounding my property. And since then, I have felt very protected on this land.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never before understood the impact of safe and trusting land. And as you and I had done more research into psychedelic and psychedelic healing and energies, and when you open yourself up to different realms, there's some
Portals.
dark energy, right?
Yeah.
There's dark energy that can come in unbeknownst to someone who is entering into healing. If the land is not safe, or if it has had trauma on the land, that can be really harmful and
Mm-hmm.
create some, real spiritual, what's the phrase? Spiritual emergence, right? Where you can have
Yeah.
some very dark things enter into your consciousness as a result of going on a journey. And so I never before had understood the power of safe and protected land. And with our owl, I felt very protected. And I've always heard owls in my neighborhood, and I live up against open space, and there's a lot of wildlife around here. And I've tuned into the owls for years. And in fact, it's been one of my mindfulness practices when I can't sleep sometimes. I'll tune into the sound of the owl, which I often hear at night. And I really pay attention. I can hear one in the distance, and they're like having a conversation. So if my mind has been wandering, it's always been a practice to tune into the foreground and the background
Mm-hmm.
of the sound of the owl. So I've always known they've been around. And once before, we had seen some up in the tree. We had friends over, and one of them spotted on a totally different part of the property. But so we know they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really curious with the question of, would we ever see it again?
Mm-hmm.
And a couple weeks later, it was dusk. I was out in my backyard with my daughter. She was in the pool. And from the redwood tree where the hammock is, I heard a sound. And this was interesting because when we rescued her out of the pool, the owl made a clicking sound. It wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
hoot,
It was
a
a
hooting.
surprising sound.
It was clicking from what I can recall.
Yeah. And
I
I
don't know if
don't,
it was like a
it
cry,
was,
if it
it
was
was strange.
protective,
Yeah.
but it was a very specific sound. And I think actually I have it on video because I got the rescue on video.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in the pool with my daughter, and I hear that sound. And I'll never forget, I was actually on the phone with my mom at the time, and I immediately hung up. I'm like, oh my God, the owl's here. And I hung up the phone, and I saw an owl fly from the redwood to the tree above the pool. And even though it was dusk, I got close enough and I zoomed in, and I'm like, that's it. That's our owl. She's back. She's here. And Pasha said that they stay in the same neighborhood for like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of comfort I had in that moment of like this exhale, ah, there she is. We're
Well,
protected. She's watching over. It's,
and it really brought up this whole, I talk a lot about primal world beliefs. And, to what extent do you see the world as safe versus dangerous, or alive versus mechanistic, or, kind versus uncaring? And these stories bring up some of these world beliefs for me, in the sense of, what is a more, pleasant, awe-invoking, comforting place or world to live in? One that is dead and mechanistic, or one that is alive where everything is interconnected
mhm,
and pregnant with meaning? And to me, there's
yeah,
no contest.
absolutely.
I'd rather live in a world where things are alive and have meaning and can communicate and have some sentience.
So this whole experience, I mean, as awe-inspiring as it was for me, was one of the ways that I found comfort in the mystical regarding our own healing of our relationship. That there were things that we needed to clear that we weren't seeing clearly, both in ourselves and with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the spiritual experience with Pasha, with the psilocybin, with the owl, it for me was a reminder of keep staying open, keep looking. What is the part I can't see? What is the not just the lesson I'm here to learn, but now it's time to apply that lesson into practice. Let me get out of my own way, look at the bigger picture, look for the interconnectivity, look for those blockages. And the more we keep doing that, the more vulnerable we keep getting to look at our own selves, to look at our own shit, to reveal that dark place.
And the stronger our connection gets.
It gets stronger and stronger.
And yeah, I think one of the questions is, what am I not seeing? Where are my blind spots? And that's been one that's driven me, I don't know, for, I guess 2023, maybe that's why 2023 was so damn painful.
Yeah.
Oh, there's somewhere else I was going to go with that. Oh, the other thing that is interesting, just in terms of a selling point for vulnerability, was an article I was reading this morning about friendship and how research shows that it takes about 30 to 40 hours to go from an acquaintance to a friend, to move that relationship forward to friend status. And it takes about 150 to 200 hours to go from friend to best friend or really close friend. And, you know, I guess that's good perspective. For some people, it might be like, wow, that's a lot of work, or, you know, that's a lot of time. And here's the thing that kind of blew me away. And I think this is an incredibly, incredibly important point. They found that when we are vulnerable, when we share something that is difficult for us, or a challenge, or where we've fallen down, or how we feel, or about our internal state, our internal landscape, it collapses that time frame from 200 hours to 45 minutes.
That is wild.
Let that sink in. And I see this recently. I you know, since Brett passed away, I've been very open about that with people, including even some strangers. And met a young man at 24 Hour Fitness who works at the front desk. Great young man, Shamar. And I told him this. I barely knew him. And he was awesome. He was like, yeah, man, I've had a lot of loss too. You know, best to stay present, keep breathing, keep moving forward, which was really good. I think he's like 21. And that just started conversations between the two of us. And then he told me something vulnerable from his side. I really like this kid. And it was that vulnerability that formed this connection quickly. And that just fascinates the hell out of me. Because we're socialized to not be vulnerable, to not share that stuff, especially men. And yet, what if that's exactly what's getting in the way of this epidemic of loneliness, or causing, or one of the causes, I guess there's many, of this epidemic of loneliness?
And how many couples are lonely in their partnership?
Ooh.
I would venture to say the majority of them.
Yeah.
And you know, that vulnerability piece really also confirms Brene Brown's work around her research on vulnerability. To sum that up, vulnerability breeds connection. And, you know, you and I have been doing a couple of Instagram lives in support of our upcoming masterclass series. And one of the things we talked about recently was what you've been reading about, ongoing, you know, understanding of how men and women are socialized differently. And that, you know, men are socialized to be autonomous and independent, and women are socialized as more caregivers. So you get this chasing dynamic where the men are striving for more independence.
Not just caregivers, they're socialized to be relational.
Relational, right.
That it's all about interconnection. And really, men are socialized for disconnection, which is tragic.
Yeah, that autonomy, that
they're socialized for self-reliance, independence, competitiveness. I don't need anybody. which is a tragic, terrible lie to tell yourself. It's
Yeah.
completely untrue because everyone stands on the shoulders of giants.
Hmm.
And if you're not recognizing that, there's a problem we got to talk about.
Yeah. And when we look at the couples that we work with, whether it's our individual clients or the couples that are coming in to, you know, receive support together, it's really scary and really hard to begin to be vulnerable because that would require a self awareness of what you're even feeling,
Mm-hmm.
then the language to identify it, then the courage to communicate it, then the ability for the other person to receive it openly, open heartedly, open mindedness, non defensive. I
Yep,
mean,
that's a big
there
one.
are layers and layers of being able to receive someone else's emotions, truth, feelings, fears, needs.
Yeah, I think you got to learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable because a lot of vulnerability is going to reveal some uncomfortable shit.
Yeah.
And one of the
And
things I loved about Shamar's response was he just rolled with it.
yeah,
And it was really quite helpful to me.
yeah,
And I keep telling people that, they were like, oh, I'm not sure I know what to say. And I'm like, look, there's nothing you can say. And I really appreciate just simply your listening,
hmm,
you're witnessing my grief, you asking,
yeah.
but there's nothing you can say. And that's not on you. That's just the situation.
It would be amazing how many more people would feel connected if they either A, allowed themselves to be witnessed, because sometimes we just hold up that shield or protection around us, or how much they would offer the opportunity to witness somebody else. Because as we know with grief, just bearing witness, I mean, that's really what compassion is. It's just to
Yeah.
sit with. There's very little that we can do to solve what goes on in our lives and in our world. And just to have the sense of I see you is so healing. And I think for me, that was a big piece of kind of looping it back with my personal work with Pasha was I felt so seen by her in my experience since childhood.
Yeah.
And I know for me, when I feel unseen, I am disconnected in that relationship. That, kind of goes hand in hand for me around authenticity of when I feel most connected is when I'm seen. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
And yet there's a variety of ways to access that ability. And I think that's something that you and I are really passionate about right now. This is, a new big area of the work that we're offering to others is this joint work for couples to
Mm-hmm.
do the inner work and the relational work because there is great couples therapy out there. I mean, the Gottman's all research based, Harry Real, amazing.
Sue
And
Johnson.
yet, oh, incredible. And yet, if we take some of the basic tools that the Gottmans teach of love maps, which is getting to know each other in the here and now, or gratitude and appreciation,
Bids for
cultivating that
attention.
culture, understanding when someone is wanting to connect and how to respond positively to those bids for attention, or Terry Reel's ability to be relational. All that's amazing. But if you don't have the self awareness to understand what's going on inside of you, where you're stuck, what you're feeling, what your wounds are from your childhood, from previous relationship, what your narratives. One of my favorite questions is what's the story you're telling yourself right now? Like, where are you not allowing yourself to be open? So, all those tools are hard to get to until you do that own inner work.
Well, yeah. And one of the things as you were talking, I was thinking emotional regulation. I
Oh,
don't think the
huge.
majority of people out there can regulate their emotions well enough to not be triggered in the heat of the moment. And then we
Mm-hmm.
get emotionally flooded, we get reactive, you start saying stupid shit. You never, I always, just
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's not true. And so, and that's, I would argue that's my work. If I
Mm-hmm.
can't regulate my emotions, that's something I need to put work into.
Yeah.
And it's
And
it's
that
also the
will,
basis of, I mean, Philippe Golden at Stanford argues that emotional management is one of the, if not the pillar of a happy life.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of merit to that.
yeah. And having this basis of this more open mindedness has allowed us to get out of our own way to see the bigger picture for our relationship, for our own inner healing and relational healing. And it's ongoing. This is never one and done work. But it's creating the space to allow for it.
Yeah. And I think this just came to mind. I'm not sure, it's a little tangential, but I'm a really big fan of Antonio Damasio's work, who's a leading neuroscientist and researcher. And his quote that I love is, "We are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think." In other words, emotions are primate. They're the more powerful, the more
Mm-hmm.
quicker. And I think the more we can begin to wrap our heads and hearts around that notion, the more we can give ourselves permission to feel, the more we can be curious about what we feel, the better we get at putting labels on those feeling states and getting more
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in talking about them without shame or embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart because it's going to bring up a lot to
Mm-hmm.
recognize what are my barriers to my even my own feelings. And
And
yeah, I was just going to say one of the things, of I've been someone who have always felt deeply, and yet I'm just now at just turned 46 years old, learning to tap into some of those emotions. And you've been a big proponent and contributor to me getting tapped into my anger. And it's been a very powerful experience for me to be in a space to myself feel that and not be afraid of it. Because I think I was always so afraid of my own emotions as being the thing to disconnect me from others. If I express my sadness or my anger, it's going to push people away.
but
The
can I
truth
pause you there
is,
for a second?
yeah.
Because it's interesting going back to Carol Gilligan's work, right? Of women are socialized to be connected, to value the relationship or relationships above all else, even self. And that's exactly what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship was more important in your framework than feeling your own emotions.
And yet, by not allowing my emotions to be felt, actually led me to have very unfulfilling relationship.
Uh-huh.
So there was this like negative spiral to it
Right.
because I wasn't being fully authentic in my own truth, let alone to the truth of the other. And so I then never felt seen because it was my story of if I reveal myself, then I'll be rejected.
Well, and also you never felt seen because you never shared your whole self.
Yes. Yeah. And learning to be okay with all of my emotions, even when they're uncomfortable, and to allow myself to reveal them vulnerably is a huge piece of where I have felt safe with you. At times, it hasn't always looked pretty. It's been hard, but
I'm
I
still a
think
work in
we've
progress
also,
too.
thank God, because we both are. But that's where repair comes in and
Yeah.
coming back and reconnecting. But it's been also powerful to be role models to our three girls
Mm-hmm.
in teaching them this emotional expression. And I feel compelled to share. So it was just my birthday a couple of days ago. And what I wanted to do on my birthday was go to the Smash Room.
Which
And
is,
a room, we live near San Francisco, and you get 30 minutes in a room of all plywood, everything in there. And you're given protective gear of a helmet and full like face goggles, like this whole protective mask over your whole face and gloves.
hard
And
hat,
yeah, and you got to break shit. And
electronics,
I brought in some old
ceramics.
laptops. They had, a microwave in there, speakers, a big fan. They had a whole box full of ceramic ramekin. They had sledgehammers and metal baseball bats, and we made a smash room playlist. And me and you and my two daughters and your daughter, the five of us went, and it was an amazing experience
Mm-hmm.
and so bonding, so much fun. But to get out that emotion in a permissible environment and, to play music that pumped us up to like get it out. And
Angry music.
yeah, and walked out of there just feeling empowered. And then we were able to laugh and the ease, although, it was tiring. I mean, we were sweating in
Oh
there
yeah.
and it
It
was
was a workout.
exhausting. It was exhausting, which made bowling afterward really tiring, but
Uh-huh.
super fun. And I remember my oldest daughter posted it on her story of us at all at this mash room, and one of her friends was like, "That's what your mom wanted to do on her birthday." And my daughter was like, "Yeah, it was her idea." And her friend's like, "That's fucking awesome." And I don't know many people who are teaching their young adult children to get in touch with their emotions this way. And even just you and I sharing our spiritual journey with our kids is giving
hmm
them at 18 and 20 years old another lens through which to see themselves, their relationships, the world around them, to help make sense of what we can't seem to make sense of, to validate their own experience and only want to be in relationship, whether romantic or friendship, with others who can give that permission. I mean, it's really powerful what we've gone through. Our entire relationship has been a huge growth journey, but specifically, as hard as 2023 was, it was the most powerful year, like really propelling us into massive growth and healing
Yeah.
and the deepest connection we've ever felt.
Yeah, I think it really slingshotted us to next level of evolution.
Yeah. And, to kind of wrap this up, because part of the purpose of all this storytelling is, I think, that reminder to stay open minded, to stay curious, to stay open to the interconnectivity, all things. You don't have to
Keep
be,
learning.
you don't have to be on psilocybin or talking to spiritual healers to look for that interconnectivity, to be open to it, to ask the question, what am I here to learn? What's another lens I need to look through? What am I not seeing? What are the
There
barriers
was
in my own way to connection with myself or with the people important to me?
there was a quote that I love, and it's by a rabbi whose name I forget. But it's life is routine, and routine is resistant to wonder.
Mm,
So if you want to wake up, if you want to experience more positive emotions like wonder, you got to get out of the routine. You got to get out of the mindlessness. You got to stop being an automaton.
I love that quote. So, if any of this is inspiring to you, then John and I invite you to join us in a journey of self insight, relational insight, growth, awareness. We are starting a monthly masterclass series based on a framework that we've come up with called the AWARE method. AWARE is an acronym for how to truly wake up to what's going on inside you, what's going on around you relationally, and to begin to be more curious about the blockages of your own inner work that are preventing you from connecting with others in all relationships, but most specifically, romantic partnerships, where we say, this is the most important person in my life. This is the most important relationship. And for many people, those relationships are left them wanting connection, wanting vulnerability, wanting authenticity, wanting more fun, more playfulness. And that's all possible when we do the work. And it doesn't have to be dredging through the mud. I mean, it might bring up hard stuff, but you can start small with a lot of the tools that we're going to be teaching and be able to create huge shifts.
And where can they find out more about that?
So, in the show notes, you will find a link to the Aware Method course. We are starting our first masterclass on Tuesday, January 9th. So, just if you're listening to this live, it'll have just coming out the next day, but they will be recorded. You'll be able to retroactively access them if you sign up after the fact. And you can sign up for the whole year, all 12, or each one individually. If you go to my website, joryrose.com, under events, you will see the Aware Method Masterclass series. You can find it there. It lists out January through December, all the different topics that we're doing. And this is, really our intention to build greater community around working with people who are not questioning whether or not they want to stay together, right? This is for the couples who know that they want to be together, but just want to get to that next level of their relationship, right? Who are committed to doing the work, knowing that it's going to take them to that next place. And we happen to see a lot of couples at this turning point around when their kids are launching, because it leaves the couples asking, okay, well, what about us now? Now what? We've done that child raising thing. Now what? I love you.
What about this relationship that we've neglected for 18 years?
Right. Or more. Or I don't know who you are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've not paid attention to myself, let alone you. So, this is really for couples who have a deeper desire for connection, for more playfulness and fun, vulnerability, self-awareness, relational awareness, tools for repair and healing, mindfulness, being able to stay more present. So we're pretty excited about this. And this is,
there's anger management, there's positive psychology, there's all sorts of great stuff in there. And the other couple that I could see this being applicable for or really useful for is one of the dynamics that we frequently see, and forgive me for the stereotype here, but a wife who is interested in growth and a husband who is sort of on the fence about it and maybe a little bit gun shy to go in to see someone. This is a good way to dip your toe in the water to begin to learn more about the tools in a safe, even anonymous way, if you want.
Right. Right. Because you can not show up on a live Zoom call and do this on your own time. We're going to have exercises as like homework assignments. Our whole
or show up and not do the video, not,
right.
Your camera's off.
Right. Our whole intention is to get couples to be more connected. Without connection, we're walking side by side. We're zombies through our life. We're not awake. And I see way too many people missing out on what's right in front of them because they maybe haven't been taught, or they haven't been ready, or they haven't had the time to dedicate to themselves and their relationship. And this will also culminate, 2/3 way through the year with our retreat in Costa Rica, which is going to be all of this in practice, in person, and then some with amazing excursions and great food and great spa treatments and great community. So we really invite you to join in. This is an invitation for growth. This is an invitation for insight, for connection. And we've gotten here through some very spiritual ways, like the owls and Tasha and talking to trees. And it doesn't always have to be that woo-woo for it to be powerful. And if you're open to that, we could help with that too. And there's a variety of ways. I like to think of it as different doors into the same room, right? So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you listening and sharing our journey with us. We have found that these joint episodes really seem to inspire a lot and get a lot of feedback. So if this spoke to you, we would really value a review, a rating, a share, so we can help others journey forward to becoming more evolved cavemen and cavewomen, and ultimately have a relationship that they feel safe, secure, connected, alive. And thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. Until next time, this is Dr. John and Jory.
Be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.